by far, like I've really looked at, let's say, 100 or 1,000 different kind of keywords, and every single time I just keep on going back to soul alignment as the key. You essentially have the self, and then you have the not self. When we're talking about soul alignment, it's making sure that everything you feel, think, and do is aligned with that true self. And they say don't worship false idols. Your ego would be the number one thing, the number one skill of your ego, mimicry. I don't really rate most people's intuition when they say it out loud. So the 6 gifts of soul alignment, the number one is oneness. Again, aligned, one, literally you can see it in my hands, oneness. You know, those best moments in our lives, those moments where we felt bliss, it's when we knew we were in the right place doing the right thing. How do we bottle up those experiences? What was the secret ingredient that made that moment so magic? I've spent like 20 years trying to find these answers. I wouldn't be able to sleep comfortably if I didn't have these answers. Thanks everyone for joining. I've been working on a product for about 3 to 4 years. Always thinking of my elevator pitch. If I saw Richard Branson, or if I saw somebody that needed help and just was like, what is it that you do? How can you help me? What would be the one thing that I would focus on as my go-to, especially when I didn't know them? Soul alignment, by far, like I've really looked at, let's say, 100 or 1,000 different kind of keywords, and every single time I just keep on going back to soul alignment as the key. Its importance, we first need to just break down some words. The first thing to say about your soul, or anytime we kind of get into these real big words like soul, like it's a real big and heavy word, the first thing to understand is that there will never be a true description that you could use in words to describe something like that, because the minute you put a word to it, it's lost its purity, it's lost its essence, and it can always be challenged and argued against. For the purposes of what I'm explaining, your soul just means your true self, the essence, you in your essence. You essentially have the self, and then you have the not self. And when we're talking about soul alignment, it's making sure that everything you feel, think, and do is aligned with that true self. So anyone that's going to start following me, especially on YouTube, you'll see this graph quite a lot. You're not going to see this exact graph, but you'll see graphs like this. It allows me to display information in an almost like neural network perspective. So if you understand like synapses and how the brain works, or essentially a mind map, this is a version of a mind map. This is about the influences that influence our being. And when I mean being, I mean the all of us, the all part of ourselves, including the ego, including the personality, including the id or the ID, the identity. I'm talking about everything, mind, body, and soul. What are the ways in which we are influenced? That essentially was my question. And this document or this neural network helped me to provide that answer. And so when you look at the internal influences, we're looking at things like, chakras. We're looking at our mental states, our physical states, our 5 senses, the various types of bodies, our perceptions, our beliefs, our motivations, magic. Most people live their life not in alignment. That is just a fact. That is my observation. Let's not even go with fact. That is my observation. That's the statistical observation as well when I look into the data, when I start looking at stress, anxiety, depression, mental health issues, all of these things as well to kind of back up my observed thoughts around speaking with people who are going through problems and so on and so forth, is that most people are misaligned. And the truth is that we never really stood a chance. What I've come to realize when I just kind of meditate on this graph is that life is too complex for us to get it perfect, or for us to get it quote unquote right. How are we supposed to balance our emotional state, balance our mental state, balance our physical state, balance with our ambitions? And all of these things are internal. Balance with our motivations. How much of us really understand our chakras and how they actually work on a real knowing level, not just a I read it in a book level. Oh, I read it in a book that you've got 7 chakras. Like, can you feel your chakras? Do you know when one is open or not? You know, like, these are just genuine questions that you would have to ask yourself in your own time. And it's no wonder, what I'm trying to say is it's no wonder that we feel as humans the way we do. And I'm talking about those times when we're not feeling, let's say, on cloud 9. I'm talking about the times when we question ourselves, those times when we are in those moments of doubts, those times when we're unsure, those times when we're anxious. With all of these things going on, and these are just the internal things. And then we move on. I'm not going to spend too long. I'm not going to spend too long on this, but we then move on to like some of the external things. And you've got, just as we know, people. As we know, we have people, you know, external. That would be one of the main external things. You've got your environment, you've got people. I kind of broke it down to those 2 levels. And you've got your stakeholders, you've got your professionals and your academics. You know, that's a whole bunch of people as well. By the way, I've only built this to 2 levels. So all of this, I've only went to 2 levels. So even when I'm talking about stakeholders, I'm just talking about professionals and academics. But within that, there's at least, you know, many different types of professionals and academics. There are many different types of spiritual and metaphysical guides, for example. So I've only broken it down to 2 levels. I didn't go too deep with this. It was just, again, just to give you guys an idea. But all of these things are influencing us. Like as I was saying to somebody yesterday, our thoughts are not our own. You know, if your mum told you that cleanliness is next to godliness, and every single day you literally had to tidy up your room, tidy up your room, tidy up your room, tidy. Cleanliness is next to godliness. Cleanliness is next to godliness. Cleanliness is next to godliness. And then you're stressing your children out about not tidying their room. But because it was potentially even unconscious, and I'm talking about, obviously we've got conscious and unconscious biases or behaviors and habits. And then next minute you're like, oh my days, I sound just like my mother. And so that particular thought wasn't your own thought. That was a thought that was projected into you, that you allowed. And allowed is a strong word, because most of these things, especially parental, would be when you're not able to put up any shields. Like, there's no filter, essentially. Whatever your parents say goes. And so, unless you're the rebellious type, but for most people, you know, there's a certain level of obedience with their parents, or respect at the very least, or you'd hope for. So your thoughts are not your own, but yet they influence how you think, feel, and how you behave. And I just look at this with compassion. I think that's the best way that I can see this. When I look at this, I'm like, nobody really stands a chance. When I hear all people's pains and, you know, obviously I speak to people, isn't it? You know, doing what I do. Frustrations. And it's like, well, yeah, of course. Of course. Anytime that we're not aligned in with our soul, we're going to be feeling something. Unless we drink ourselves to death, smoke ourselves to sleep, hedonistically party until we drop. At some point in those moments of silence, we're going to be feeling something. And that thing that we're going to be feeling, when you get down to its root, is a misalignment, is something that's missing, is a disconnection. That will be the root, that will be where the root of your suffering is a misaligned soul. And I mean, me, myself, I felt in my life. One of my biggest examples of this was when I started my own business. So I had a career in sales and marketing for, I don't know, 15 odd years, something like that. And built myself up to director level, you know, at a decent company. I was earning a lot of money. But what I noticed is that there was a pattern that quite often used to play in my life, which was, as a salesman, a salesperson is like, anyone that's been in sales before knows that there's no guarantee, there's no safety net. If you don't hit your targets, at some point you're going to get sacked. That's just the game. That is what it is. So there's no resting within sales. And I'm talking about when you have to find your own sales, basically. There's no resting in this job. And so, in often to get myself to that top of that leaderboard, or even just to sustain this job, it would come at a sacrifice. And the sacrifice I would always make was my spirituality. I would always watch less videos, read less books. And it wasn't a time thing. It was nothing to do with time. I had the time. I still had free time. I was still, you know, going home and doing whatever I needed to do when I was at home. But I would observe that I wouldn't really focus. And most of the time, it's actually a conscious decision. I'm not going to focus on spirituality at this moment because I need to focus on my job. And when I did focus on spirituality and my job at the same time, the importance of the job would diminish to a point where I couldn't keep myself motivated. And I would eventually either get sacked or leave, because I could feel myself serving too many masters, or in this particular case, two masters, this spiritual side and this achiever, money achiever, ambitious side. And when I reflected on my 15-year career, and I was, you know, still studying metaphysics and all that kind of stuff, but very, very few times would I be at, let's say, 10. Obviously, if we're talking about like ranking 10 out of 10, very rarely would I be at 10 out of 10 for my spiritual proficiency, knowledge, learning, whatever, experiences, and then be 10 out of 10 in my career. Very, very, very rarely did these two things meet. And for me, at my time, for most of my life, especially my career, those were pretty important things to me. Where in an ideal world, it would have been nice to have 10 out of 10 on both of them. But because of the nature of my sales job, I don't need to go into it too much, but because of the nature of sales, I don't know if anyone's been in sales or anything before, but the nature of sales, naturally, depending on who you're trained by, who you're taught by, the kind of company, the culture, and so on and so forth, it can be quite unethical. It can be often unethical. Not always, because I've worked at different companies with different ethics, but I've definitely worked at jobs where morals and ethics and doing the right thing, being truthful with the customer, wasn't encouraged. I remember in my early days when I was 17, just finished uni. Yeah, like my first job when I finished uni, so I'm about 22 years old or something like that. this company, they for 6 months I worked at this company, and after the 6 months I realized that the product that I was selling just didn't exist. When I mean it didn't exist, it literally didn't exist, as in it was a complete scam. And I worked at this company for 6 months, and I'd probably say for about 2 months I was starting to, because by then I was making some sales, and I was starting to get feedback from clients like, you know, where is this product? Where is this product? And obviously my sales manager, you know, I'm young, my sales manager would come on and he'd say some words. And then after about a month or two, I just realized that his words were bullshit, basically, because he was saying the same thing and there was no follow through. I'm getting the same customers and so on and so forth. And so, especially in my early years, where I didn't feel like I was picking and choosing. And again, no one put it on me. I accepted these jobs, you know. But there would always become a point where I would either lose faith in the company because the product wasn't good enough, and I had a certain level of honor. I wouldn't say I'm the most honorable person, especially at those ages. But, you know, I'd at least expect, for example, a product to be there that I'm selling. It may not be the best product, but, you know, at least have a product that we're saying we're selling. And so just being in situations like that often led me to situations where I felt like I had to compromise. And again, I didn't have to, but it made me uncomfortable and uneasy enough for me to question myself, like, you know, is this worth it? Is it worth, I wouldn't want to go as heavy as say losing your soul, because I think that's a misnomer, but you know, having questions like that anyway enter my head and coming with those contemplations. And so a very common thing that most people will have when I hear them speak is this idea of serving many masters. And so this particular chart, each one of these at any time, you could make a god or an idol. You can idolize. You can make one of these a master. Like, you can make easily your personal goals your master, where that phrase by any means necessary, i.e. this is now the number one thing that I'm going to focus on. And regardless of who, where and what, this is my target and focus. And so because of that, often I'm going to focus on this, you know, I have an ambition. I'm going to focus on my personal goals. It means I need to be competitive. And so I might get into a dog-eat-dog world and stuff like that. Or I'm going to enter with this mindset of dog-eat-dog. You know, what is the vibration that we're operating off in that particular situation? I don't need to prejudge anything. I'm making up scenarios, but it's probably not going to be the highest vibration. So does anyone feel like they've had points or times in their life where they feel like they're serving too many masters, or they feel like they're getting pulled in too many different directions, and it doesn't feel like it's aligned with their soul? Moving on to the next level now. I've built something called the Soul Noble Path, the decoding stage, the designing stage, and the divining stage. And we've already essentially started the decoding stage, because this is part of the decode. We're trying to, let's just say we're trying to deconstruct the matrix, or break down the matrix, or decode the matrix, for anyone that's seen that film or knows that reference. And this is one of those first steps in doing that. So we've discussed what a soul is, how I've actually defined it, or how I like to speak about it in reference to this, is, in its most basic terms, your soul is your home. But not home as in a place where you reside, but is the true you, the true you, the place of your residence. And one of the concepts that I introduce is that life is a journey and your soul is a map. And what you're doing is you're trying to tap into this map. You're trying to understand this map, which is very, very complex and complicated at times, and is often masked in symbology and these things that I teach and help people decode. But essentially your soul has the route for you home. And a lot of what this journey is about is understanding these signs and symbols and understanding the language of the soul, understanding the language of the divinity, or understanding the language of the divine. That's what a lot of the decoding element is about, or the decoding phase or stage is about. And so then once we understand it, we can then start to, map out and plan our journey. All right, question time. So we all understand life is a journey, yeah? As a metaphor. It's one of the classic metaphors. We all understand that life is a journey. So let's just say that is life is a journey. Can anyone point to where their soul is? Again, this is all symbology. This is all symbolic. Obviously, we are not a graph. We're not living and walking graphs, but we understand that life is a journey. And normally when you see timelines, and this is just like the ups and downs, that we go through. And so where do you think your soul is in this? Essentially, what is the soul is all of the white space. That is where your soul is. Your soul is all of the white space. This would represent your life's journey. That would represent your life's journey on a conscious, let's say, personality level. Like, I'm feeling up today. I'm feeling down today. I feel like I've grown today. I feel like and this line would be, let's say, like your line of achievement. Like, or success. Or your judgments, basically. But something where you're assessing your either happiness or your judgment, but you're assessing and be like, I need to hit this line. And as we know in life, because it's not constant, there's ups and downs, and sometimes we fall below. A good way to describe the soul as a metaphor, again, I haven't created this, is just, I'm always looking for metaphors and ways to explain things. So one of my favorite ways to explain the soul is weather metaphors, which is you've got clouds, and those clouds can either be represented, depends on who's telling the story, as the events or your emotions or your thoughts. And your soul is the background. It's the ever present. It's the thing that doesn't move. So when some people are like, I've lost my soul. You didn't really lose your soul. Or I won't say you didn't lose your soul. That is you as a personality with at a level of ignorance. Always. That statement is made from a level of ignorance. But your soul was always there because it's everywhere. And one of the reasons why it's the white space as well, like even a bit deeper, but not to get too deep, is it exists beyond space and time. It's beyond space and time. Because anything that's within space and time is open to decay and destruction and imperfection. And so your soul has to sit. The home of your soul is beyond space and time. This is so important to understand. It's just one of those things that you just got to sit with. Like if it doesn't hit you straight away, that would be like my first recommendation for you, is that your soul is beyond space and time. The question I would ask yourself is, in your list of priorities, where does your soul alignment rank? I don't really need an answer because I've kind of been biased in terms of what I think. But that would be the question that I would reflect on myself. When we were looking at this graph and these like complex charts, and again, we didn't go into every single point, but you got a flavor of all of these things which pull you in different directions, external, internal as well. Where are you prioritizing time, space, energy towards soul alignment? If it's not number one, why? Now, that's not to say, like I said, that's not to say that it should be number one. You do what you want in life. How important are those other things that you're doing? It's kind of a trick question, by the way. But, you know, I only to give you like everything. Because if you deep it for long enough, there's an answer to that question, which I'll probably reveal at the end because, you know, I talk a lot and so I'll probably just give it away. But if you deeped it for long enough, you'd probably come to that answer yourself. You'd probably come to a certain level of an answer for yourself. So the last thing on decode before we move on to design, what are our states of being? And so in Buddhist tradition, you have self and not self. You have things that are self and things that are not self. And in my observation, which has formed an opinion, basically, based on my observation, is many people confuse their not self aspects with their self. Say that again. Many people, the problem with most people is that they confuse their not self aspects with self. Some of it is down to ignorance, as in they just don't know, like it's a knowledge thing. A lot of times it's also down to their attachment to the not self, which makes them almost desire that it was part of the self. One of the key things to that, one of the key examples of that is your emotions. It's going to be a trigger point for everybody right now. It's like literally, it's a dangerous game talking about people's emotions. Based on everything that I've read and know to be true, your emotions are part of your not self. Your emotions are linked to your body, your neurology, your chemistry even. If we understand the soul on its most basic level, so there's this phrase that I've used before, that I use some at times, like I'll use it now. It's like a Pali term called neti neti. And it's essentially like, in order to describe God, you don't use words to describe God. It comes from a concept of you don't use words to describe God. You use words to define everything that it's not. Because every time you try to attach something to God or the soul, you could almost just take for granted that it's not going to be that. It's not going to be quite that. And so what you're trying to do is you're trying to imagine your soul as a diamond in 6 tons of soil. And we often just keep on mistaking the soil like it is the diamond. And so we're trying to clear away all of the debris, i.e. this netty concept. This not self, nope, that's not self, nope, that's not self, nope, that's not self, nope, that's not self. We're trying to clear away this debris so we can finally feel, see, know that jewel, which is obviously the soul in this metaphor. But in the real world, experientially, when you get into an argument with somebody, how often are they displaying that as a fact? How often are they living like that is actually the truth? Even when you were to calm them down, or maybe not even necessarily calm them down, but another time when they're not maybe so emotional, you could have a conversation about that. And they may even agree with you. But that minute you touch a hot topic, a hot button topic, something controversial, do something that they don't like, how often would they default? Because you said it was a habit. That's a really great point. How often would they default to that state of being where for them it seems so real that it might as well be? The difficulty of life, or one of the challenges, is how can we stay in a state of knowing? How can we stay in a state of being in self, even in those times of distress, uncomfortableness, unease? How do we do that? That would be that, I imagine, for most people is one of the top 10 challenges that they have in life. You know, I'm not saying it's easy, by the way. I'm not saying it's easy. These are again, your emotions are habits. Habits are the hardest things to break. There's nothing harder to break than a habit, especially one that you're addicted to. And most of us are addicted to our patterns of behaviors and emotions. And obviously we would want to start on those ones where the emotions and states that don't serve us. You know, how many of us are living in patterns and habits and states that don't serve us, that are self-sabotaging? You know, most people, I don't think I'm being too harsh in saying that, probably most people on this call. And so the first level is knowledge. You know, and I'm biased as well. Like, my business is called So Know, and know means knowledge. If anyone didn't know how to pronounce it, if they've just seen it, I'll just let you know. That G is silent, so it's So Know. Just to let you know. And know is short for knowledge. And what I teach is knowledge, essentially, and hopefully to people that have open minds and open hearts, where they can receive information and turn it into gold for themselves. And so that is the mission, that is the vision. This, the coding stage, like I said, is about the knowledge. So let's move on to the design stage. And so within the design stage, I've kept it pretty simple to a skill set. The skills that you should be looking to acquire or gain or build in order to align yourself with your soul. I've got 5 skills. And so the first one is questions in mentation. So these are just thought-provoking questions that you would want to ask yourself in your own time. You don't need to do it now. I'm not expecting anyone to do it now, but you can, let's say, start that process with these questions. What does my soul want? That would be the first question. What does my soul want? Where? So now we've got the what, now we've got the where. Where is my soul calling me to? So remember we spoke about the journey and the map, the soul being a map. So at the end of that map is something. Where is my soul calling me to? Another question. What does soul alignment look like for me? And the key thing there is for me. My soul wasn't designed to do the same thing as your soul. And so I need to understand it from my perspective, a unique perspective. I would argue there's very few reasons that I could think of that you wouldn't prioritize these questions as the most important thing to find an answer for in your life. I'm sure someone can come up with something else, but I would struggle to find something more important than answering at least one of these questions, because you answer one of these questions, it will lead to the other two. I can guarantee you that. So they're very similar questions. They've got slight variances of nuances. What does my soul want? Where is my soul calling me to? And what does soul alignment look like to me? Now, to me now, you could even say, now, what does it look like in this present moment? So, yeah, if anyone wants to write those questions down or anything, you can do. Or if you want me to send them to you after, I'm happy to. Again, I'll be recording this as well. But those are the 3 questions that I would want an answer to. Again, you got to remember that you're speaking to someone that's completely biased. I've spent like 20 years trying to find these answers. I wouldn't say I've spent the whole of the 20 years, but, a major part of it is finding out these answers for myself, personally. Like, I wouldn't be able to sleep comfortably if I didn't have these answers. That doesn't even mean that I'm living in alignment. But at least I would want to know what it feels like and know, and I'm talking about from a knowledge level. I'm not talking about from a living level. That comes in the last section, the divine section. But just the knowing and the planning and the designing. So development, the next one is the skill that you want to develop is to develop alignment of your heart and your brain. This is a real, I'll say basic, it's fundamental, that's the word I'm looking for. It's a real fundamental aspect to develop coherence between your heart and your brain. That would be a major key to what I would call alignment. Especially on a felt level, like where you can actually feel it. Like you can actually almost taste it, touch it. How can you develop your heart-brain coherence? So your heart says one thing, your brain says exactly the same thing. Can we get to a level where we can train this? so it becomes a habit. Next one, develop intuition. I definitely will be having a whole YouTube video dedicated to developing intuition. It may be even, I wouldn't say it'll be a masterclass, but if I do that video, it's most likely it will be longer than the usual time. It's such a major topic, and we can go into so many details in it. But developing your intuition, again, an absolute fundamental skill set to aligning with your soul. The one thing that I've been contemplating on recently that I've never heard anyone speak about when it comes to intuition. So yeah, this was just inspired as a thought, from a meditation, is that, again, most people they rarely do bullshit themselves, quite honestly. I don't know. I can't be bothered to put it any nicer. Maybe it's getting late now, but the amount of bullshit people use as an excuse and cover it up with this word called intuition. Oh, that's just what my gut told me. Oh, I just felt that. Oh, it was my intuition. Something just told me this. And when you kind of peel away, like, ask them questions. So how did you come up with this intuition? Or what do you mean by that? And you can see that it's rooted. It wasn't rooted in intuition. It's like intuition is being used as this like catch-all term, basically. It's being used too widely. Either from a state of ignorance, i.e. they don't know what intuition really is. But I'd actually go more to the point, like they're just more bullshitting themselves, or they're trying to, because the thing is, everybody knows you can't question your intuition. Like, anyone that's half spiritual will know that you can't question intuition. So if I say it came from my intuition, well then that's just argument. It's literally argument is shut down now, isn't it? The conversation's over. It came from my intuition. So who are you to say anything to me? Kind of thing. This is what I've realized about intuition. It's a real it's become diluted. That's what I'm looking for. It's become very, very, very diluted, where I feel like it's losing its essence. It's losing its essence. And again, a lot of this stems from ignorance, essentially. Again, I'm biased, so no. Knowledge. Knowledge, wisdom. More of a wisdom, by the way, than just data.
Leon?
Yeah.
Question, and as you're talking about intuition and things like that, what would you say about dreams? Is that part of intuition? Like, if a dream is telling you something, and it comes to light, or anything like that, or if you have thought, what do you think about those things? And what is that?
Great, thank you. Great question. So, your dreams is language. That's a symbolic language. Your dreams are symbolic language. Full stop. There's no ifs or buts. That's like you reading a book. Your dreams is essentially you reading a book of symbols or a story of symbols. That's what your dreams are. Most people don't. There's either two things that are lacking. They don't understand symbols. Or they haven't done enough deep work where they know themselves well enough to understand what those symbols mean to them. And so really it's guesswork. And so what most people are doing is just guessing. And that guessing is unreliable, is what I'm trying to say. This is what I'm trying to say about this intuition. You're relying on something that you shouldn't be relying on, because it wasn't genuine intuition. It wasn't genuine insight. It was mired and covered in all of these other preconceived notions, habits, reactions, behaviors.
Does your intuition not be coming through dreams?
Yes, no. Yeah. So your intuition, not necessarily. Your intuition, your dreams, most of the time, again, it depends on the type of dream, but let's just call it 80% of the time, or most of the time, your dreams are going to be part of your subconscious mind. And your subconscious mind speaks to you in symbology, but you, as the person who is observing it, still has to have a level of knowledge and intuition. But again, what I'm trying to say is not everybody has trained themselves up to the level where they understand what is their intuition and what's not their intuition. So again, it comes down to this major theme that I'll be boring people with, which is discernment, which is essentially spiritual decision making in a nutshell. But you're not able to differentiate between what's what. So sometimes it might be your intuition and you got it right, but even a broken clock is right twice a day.
Oh, that's funny. That's a good one.
Yeah. Even a broken clock is right twice a way. So how reliable, like I feel like almost like the YouTube video I'll be doing will be something like, how reliable is your intuition really? And then capital letters, really. Like I feel that, I'm pretty sure I've actually written that one down. I've got like 100 videos. I've got 100 YouTube video ideas that I've got to do. Or just ideas that are just sitting there somewhere. So, yeah, so your dreams are one of the best ways to develop the skill of your intuition. The next one to develop is your synchronicity. Developing the skill of synchronicity. So that video that I done, my first ever YouTube video, essentially it's a story of synchronicity. It's a story of me going through this one day, or turned out to be a little bit more than one day, let's say a day and a half, 2 days, of these events that you couldn't, if I told you, it's like the story is almost unbelievable. It's so incredible. That's why I had to tell it. It's like, you know, one of the things that was incredible about this story is not just the events that were happening. It was my ability to decode what was happening spiritually. So I'm having these random things happening to me physically, and every single time one of these events happened, I called it spiritual meaning instantly. Almost instantly within that moment, or on reflection within that 24 hours of me, you know, waking up and reflecting on the day and then having certain conversations and remembering certain little details and so on and so forth. But the minute I remembered, I was able to align it to something that was happening to me in the spiritual realm. It was like I was it was like my mind had traveled beyond space and time. It was crazy to explain, but it was literally like I was living in this place beyond space or time where I could just again, anyone that's seen the Matrix, it's just a standard when Neo is seeing the green, you know, like Neo is actually seeing the reality kind of thing. He sees the codes kind of thing. It was like one of those moments, and it lasted for, like I said, like 24, 48 hours. It was insane. And I was only able to do that. Because I had mastered, I won't say mastered, it's a strong word. But I was only able to do that because I've built up a certain level of knowledge around things like symbology, things like the law of correspondence, i.e. what happens to you physically means that something's happened to you spiritually, you know. Like these are skills. Like learning synchronicity is a skill, or learning the meaning behind these moments. So, okay, you've seen the number 33. What does that mean? or you've seen the number 444. You had this thought, you looked around, and for some reason you just decided to look in this direction. You saw the number 555. Now, what does that actually mean? It would be hard to just rely on intuition to do that. I'm not saying you couldn't, but it would be difficult if the only skill that you wanted to rely on to do these things, to break down these codes, is to rely on your intuition. That's a very long road. I mean, all of these roads are pretty long, to be honest. Like learning symbols, and like if I go show you my book of symbols, you know, it's like that thick. And it's not like that's got all of the symbols, but it's a pretty comprehensive encyclopedia of symbols. So that would be one thing, is synchronicity. The last thing, I touched on this in the face-to-face lecture that I did. And I was like, it's just a basic skill that everybody should have. Like no ifs or buts. Everybody within the next 24 to 48 hours could just work out one very, very easily. Every single body should have a centering technique. Every single body should work out an exercise which allows them to put themselves back into a state of homeostasis. I forgot to say, by the way, when I was talking about home, another link to this word home is rest, or to lay down. The etymology of the word home is to lay down, is to rest. It's like your resting place, which is where you get the word homeostasis from, which is like a medical term, which basically means that you're in balance, or in a place of rest, or in a place of ease. So this ease is essentially your body moving from its state of homeostasis, which is its natural resting place. And so, yeah. And so we all should have a centering technique that allows us to get into a state of homeostasis quickly. The key word is like pretty quickly. You know, I'll say a couple of them, or I'll say a few of them. An affirmation would be the most classic example. Someone's getting on my nerves, I'm just going to say this affirmation. I center myself in spirit. It says mine's an affirmation. I center myself in spirit was what I was using for, let's say, a couple of years. But my recent one of about, let's say about 6 months, maybe a year, about 6 months. And it's just, yeah, so it's a next level one, I would say, is I'm sorry, I forgive you, thank you, I love you. That for me it has it all in there. It just has it all. It has it all in there. Like all of the hate or the anger or the frustration just goes away. Just like I can't even get mad at it. I can't even get mad anymore. Just like it's just done. It's gone. It's like whatever. I've got a new mantra that I shared yesterday for the first time, and it worked. Like I did it with somebody. It worked. That mantra is, I wholeheartedly forgive myself for my human imperfection. This will be my new mantra moving forward. Just like, I wholeheartedly forgive. And this is more obviously for when I'm mad at myself, or when I feel disappointed, or when I'm judging myself, or I feel like I felt short or whatever. You know, because I am human as well. I do go through these things as well. And yeah, this one just set me off differently. I wholeheartedly forgive myself for my human imperfections. All right, cool. Anyway, let's keep it moving. So, so basically, yeah, we're now moving on to divine. So this is about the embodiment. Yeah, we've decoded, we've designed some stuff. Or, yeah, some stuff that we need to do. And how do we live now? So this is more about the liberty. So, listening to the soul's call. how to understand and listen to the calls of the soul. Kind of touches on one of the points. I'm going to skip that one because it kind of does touch on one of the points that I mentioned before. I can't remember. Oh yeah, that was it. The self and not self. It's very similar to that. And so obviously you just need to develop that. I've given some hints already. This is where I'm going to introduce spiritual discernment. So for me, the second masterclass that I do, if I keep it in this order, obviously I can change my mind anytime I feel like it, but at the moment, the second masterclass that I'll be doing is on discernment. So it will be a whole class of a length similar to this, purely on how to discern, how to make good decisions that are obviously aligned with your soul. So that one's more of a how-to. That's why I'm not really going deep into it today. I'm kind of just hinting at it and just asking you guys to reflect and, you know, meditate within your own time. That's kind of what today one's about. But the next one will be going into the detail of, on a much more practical level. Like I've built it already as well. I've built the whole. I feel like it's the number one thing. So when we're talking about a skill, so the transformation. So again, if I've kind of reverse engineered it. So the transformation is soul alignment. The skill is discernment. The skill to get to the skill to align your soul is discernment. Or from what I would call the number one skill. And again, it's one of those easy to learn, hard to master. Actually, I wouldn't even say it's easy to learn. I would actually say most people wouldn't be able to break it down to the level that I've broken it down in my masterclass. And it's not really something I hear people talk about a lot either. Which is fine. That's what I'm here for. But it's not something I hear many people, like when I look at, you know, the spiritual circles or people talking about stuff, it's just not a topic where you can find a lot of information. That goes deep. Anyone can, you know, speak about something for 5 minutes. But yeah. So moving on. How to know and test if your soul is aligned. This is the next section. It's a real practical one. How to know or test if your soul is aligned. The most basic level was hinted at the start of which is how easy does it make you feel? How at rest does this make you feel? So this whole section is about like temperature checks kind of thing. How do we kind of check in with ourselves? Like what would be the yardstick, the measuring stick? And so one of them would be, how much at rest am I? But even with that question, that's a loaded question. That's not an easy thing to understand, because often when I'm speaking to people, and as anyone knows, I don't really care about your humanity too much. I don't really care about it at all, quite honestly. But, you know, in my nice days, I might care about it a little bit. And often, that thing that's making you uneasy is often your ego. And so, again, because people don't know how to discern between their ego and their soul, that first response to kind of want to fight or challenge and not feel rest can come from the ego. And this is where, you know, the discernment lecture will help with that. But you definitely want to get to that level where, you know, where you're feeling at ease, essentially. Am I feeling at ease? That would be a potential question you would ask yourself. Another thing, how to know if your how to know. Synchronistic events. It's my go-to. Like, as I explained in my first YouTube video, synchronicity is my personal go-to for checking whether I'm soul aligned. Almost always, when it comes to a big decision, something will happen synchronistically that will let me know whether that decision was a good one or a bad one, or whether that thing that I'm doing is a good one or a bad one. And it's a skill. Like I said before, it's a skill that I've developed. It's not, there is a certain level of intuition to it, like 100% there is. But the thing I forgot to say about intuition is it's like a black reservoir. It's a dark reservoir. Imagine intuition is like a black lagoon on a new moon. And so you don't quite know where you pulled it out from, but you know that it comes from somewhere deep within. The reason why I don't really rate most people's intuition when they say it out loud is because you haven't done the knowledge to widen your reservoir. Like, your reservoir is very shallow. You don't have many reference points to go off of. Like, when I ask you, or when I question you, or when we dig a bit more deeper, it's a very shallow reservoir. So just the final point before we move on in terms of this reservoir metaphor is this reservoir is also your subconscious. And it's by default, if I've said it's subconscious, it basically means that you're not conscious of it. So you don't know exactly where it came from because it's in your subconscious. And so all of this information that we're learning, it goes somewhere, and it's there to be used and utilized for the wise mind. And so this is why, again, just banging on this drum of knowledge. Knowledge is one of the keys. It's going to be very, very hard for you to just focus on your heart. Next thing, things just fall into place. This kind of matches. So if you add rest, which is easy, plus synchronistic events, that would equal things falling into place. And I definitely, going back to my origins, my original story of when I was serving too many masters and disassociating, let's say, the spiritual aspect of myself. One of the, if I was listening to my own lesson, in hindsight, I would have realized how hard things were. And that no matter, it wasn't my failure wasn't a lack of effort. That's one thing I could definitely say, hand on heart. It wasn't a lack of effort. For some reason, things just never fell into place. Or enough for me to see the fruits of my labor. Whereas, I know I'm at the start of this journey right now with this particular thing that I'm doing right now. Really at the start of it. Like, based on my vision and ambition, of which is massive. The way things are falling into place, it's mind-blowing, quite honestly. Again, that YouTube video where I spent 3 hours explaining this one day was the example of rest or things being easy, synchronistic events, and things falling into place. That literally is what that whole video was about. So that's another wing thing. The next thing is your energy. For me, this is one of the biggest, like, especially in terms of personal antidotal, is how is your energy? How drained are you? How drained are you from this exercise or from this thing that you're doing that you think is, you know, making you whatever you think it's going to do? Are you drained from it? Again, just speaking back to myself and my most classic example, I don't think I've ever tired when I've spoken about anything spiritual. I don't tire. And it's not like I don't get tired. I'm somebody that gets tired like everybody else. But whenever I'm having a conversation around these kind of things, there's two things. I'm going to put another thing as well. Is time. So like time and space. Like space would represent more like your energy or the expansion of your energy. It's like time as well. Obviously, we also all know time is relative. And so when time flies, that would be a classic. That would be a classic mark. They feel they've moved beyond that realm of like you lose time, you lose track of time. Your energy, you don't lose energy. You even so yeah. From a time perspective, you don't lose. You lose time, and then from an energy perspective, you don't lose energy, or you use less than what is, let's say, normal or average, or what you would expect. And then another two final things, I'll move on to these ones quickly, is an increased knowing. We've spoken about knowing quite a lot, but that sense of knowing. And then feeling focused. Like, am I able to hold my focus? Because most people, again, in this age of distraction, short attention spans, am I able to feel my focus? So those are the 7 markers or tests to know whether your soul is aligned. All right, so we've got 2 more and then we're going to finish up and we're finished. This one I'm going to touch on quite quickly. Again, I'm sure I'm going to be doing quite a lot of videos on this, so I'll touch on it quickly-ish. But there is a trap. And as usual, the trap is the ego. And specifically, how do we know whether this is an ego trick? Because that is the number one skill of your ego. For anyone that's not heard me say this before, the number one skill of your ego is mimicry. I'll say that again. The number one skill of your ego is mimicry. When they say don't worship false idols, your ego would be the number one thing that I would refer to what it's talking about when it says don't worship false idols. Don't worship false prophets. Well, you shouldn't worship any prophets, but it's the idea around a false prophet. It's the idea of something fake appearing real. And your ego is a master of deception. And so the trap is getting you into a state of comfortableness. Is why I'm saying the rest one is a bit tricky. Getting you in a state of comfortableness where you feel like it is your soul. And then the rug eventually, because time will reveal the devil. Time will reveal. Because the ego is bound to time. And so time will reveal itself that it was fake. But, you may have went 2 to 3 years down a particular path thinking it was soul aligned, to come to find out that it wasn't. And I'm sure many of us have been, I wouldn't want to use the word wasted because that's a very strong, I don't use that word. It's not really a word I would use, but where you could almost humanly feel like it was a waste of time. Or it didn't quite go to plan, for example. And so it's very difficult. That's why I said I just have compassion for humans, because I love the way I say that, like I'm not a human, but I have compassion for myself as well. Because it's so hard, quite honestly, it's so hard. When I think about just the layers and just how great the ego is, it's your greatest adversary. It's incredible. One of the tricks of the ego, one of the things with the ego, a key marker of the ego, just while we're here, just give this one to you for free now. I do want to move on. Is your ego is never satisfied. It's never satisfied. It's you can't you. When I'm saying when I'm talking about your humanity and stuff like that, another word you could use is ego, but you know, I prefer the humanity one for various reasons, language wise. But essentially, you're never going to be able to feed your ego enough where it's going to be satisfied. And so if you're feeling like that, it's like, how much money is enough money? Anyone that chases money will tell you that they've never had enough money. As a most classic example. The last one we can just run through quickly, because these are the gifts. Like, why do we want to, it should be self-evident why we would want to align our soul, but you know, I'll just be explicit with a couple of points. So I'm going to run through these really quickly, as in seconds on each of them. So the 6 gifts of soul alignment. The number 1 is oneness. Again, aligned, one, literally you can see it in my hands, oneness. Next is truth. The gift of soul alignment would mean you would be able to live in your truth. Be the true you, know, all of these things are attached to truth. Another one, again, synchronicity. It crops up everywhere. Unbiased. It's practically what I teach. It's one of the key things I teach. We'll skip this one. I'll just mention it, but I'm not going to go into it because I'll have to explain what it is. But essentially, your Sid is your Sid is a Hindu term, and it basically means your gifts. Like these would be like these would be akin to your divine gifts in Christianity. Essentially, so when you align with your soul, you would unlock your spiritual gifts. Is basically the English, the common term to say. Next is an enlightenment. And enlightenment just means that you're uncovering the truth. It's very similar to the truth one. So enlightened. And that's it actually. I'm not sure what point number 6 is. It's almost like I've messed up the note. But so those are 5 gifts of the soul of an aligned soul. That concludes the today's masterclass. And yeah, so just congratulations, or thank you very much everyone for joining today.